Namato Ratana Tayasa. May I pay homage to Triple Zim, the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. My respect goes to my parents and my teachers. Hello, good evening everyone. So today is Thursday, the 29th of October 2020, and this is Achan Sujan from Varapunya Meditation Center. As usual, I'm here with you all. Hello Gautam, hello Margaret, how's Shargay, and everyone. Good evening. So today again we will be focusing on the same topic that we have been discussing on the dependent origination, the paticcasamuppada. Hello Yvonne. And yesterday, first of all, again, apologies for just a technical problem that the Facebook just dropped and it's got off, and it was difficult to reconnect. So that's why yesterday I had to stop. And meanwhile, after the talk, I had a meeting to attend, which is the reason why there wasn't any live chanting and guided meditation. So, apologies for yesterday. Meanwhile, I also would like to request any of you, if you know someone who is a mechanical and who knows to give a service on a oil boiling heater. We need a service for the oil heating boiler. We used to have a regular guy, but this year he appeared very busy and we couldn't get anyone at the moment. We did had a big company from Aberdeen to look at it, but they say it's too old and they are not going to touch at all. So we need a local handyman who knows about it. I wish all monks knows everything, as people think that monks knows everything. But how ignorant monks are. Like me. So this is one thing that I wanted to request. If anyone knows any person who does the service for the oil heating boiler. Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. So this is the night, and we have started the flooring. All the concrete are done, and now putting the beams. So hopefully we can finish this frame done before the electricity installment on that. Okay. Right. So we are on the paticcasamuppada, the doctrine which is known as one of the very difficult to understand, and has got 12 factors, which is a very deep understanding. And I did mention that the doctrine is only understandable, fully understandable once one becomes an arahat. Otherwise, it's just a theoretical knowledge, and it can be misled as well. And then I mentioned yesterday that people during the time of the Buddha, there were 62 types of views holding that they are true, but the Buddha said that they are misleading. They are simply holding the views, their view is right. Okay, and so this paticcasamuppada, in another way, when we look at it, it simply rejects the permanent entity that is the first cause of all the other things to create. So although the paticcasamuppada begins with the avidya, the ignorance, we have to remember that this is not the first cause. It is just a relevant cause that begins, and we can relate to it. So the law of this causality and a cause and effect not only is applicable for human beings, but also all the other things. Furthermore, one thing we have to understand here that all the natural things has got the consciousness, but the level of a consciousness can be different. So because of this level of a consciousness different, and the consciousness itself is conditioned, arises, our mind is, that's why it's conditioned. And because of this conditioned, it's bound to change. And the nature of the change, so this nature of the change, no one can change it. It's a natural truth. In a way, that's why I even said that there's only one truth that is unchangeable, and that truth is the nature of change. Yeah? So this is what we need to keep in our mind, that the nature of a change is a permanent, which never change. And because of that changing nature, we normally suffer due to the inability to accept the reality of its change. And further on, and what we need to understand, that things that constantly changes, we cannot make it or take it as a permanent entity. So that's why on this teachings of the Buddha, what defines that there is nothing that is a first cause or a permanent entity that exists. All are conditioned arises, and all are conditioned fades away. And this is what the teachings in this paticcasamuppada, basically dependent origination, that everything arises depending on something else. There is no single cause for anything. Okay, so this is needs to be understood, and that's why whenever something happens, we cannot make a decision on the basis of a single doctrine. Sometimes people think that when something happens, it is probably because of the karma, or because of a karma that they have done in the past, or because of the effect of that previous karma. And the Buddha deny that completely, that is not because of the single cause of the karma. We have to think of other factors. Particularly, there is a saying that niyamas, so 5 niyamas, there are 5 other factors that we have to think of in order to define that any results that one is receiving is based on those 5 factors, not only because of the karma. Because if that is from the karma, then we become the slave of the karma. We cannot change our action, whereas Buddha's teachings is not predetermined our destiny, but our destiny we change by developing understanding and developing our way of living. So that's why it is known as the Viryavada, or the teachings based on your effort. So that's why these days famously known that Buddhism is DIY. So one has to do it in order to get the liberation. Okay? So these 5 niyamas needs to apply in order to define any incidents or any actions or any results that one is receiving. Never come to conclusion that this is because of your karma in the past, the result of your past karma. So this, if you take this view that everything is happening because of the previous karma, then you are not following the right order of the teachings. Okay, so that's why according to this dependent origination teaches us to understand that there are multiple causes for one incident, and there is no single cause for any single incident, and there is no one permanent entity in it at all. So that's why everything arises depending on one another. Okay, so this is just a background again, following from the previous talks, a background for this dependent origination. And yesterday I was focusing on the factors of bhava, the existence, and just about to touch the clinging, and the Facebook just closed away, and as a result I couldn't save the Facebook talk, and that's why you may not be able to find in a YouTube channel too. So for this yesterday's talk, I have to download it, and then download from the Facebook to the computer, and from the computer converting it to the sizable for the YouTube, and uploading the YouTube, and which I will do probably in a few days time. So and that I was talking on the bhava, the existence, and this is again I'm following from the book of Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, the third book of the Sutta Pitaka, and in this Sutta Pitaka, the Samyutta Nikaya, I am referring to this Nidana Samyutta, which has got the 90 over discourses and purely related on the paticcasamuppada, the dependent origination. And some of the discourses here will be repeating one another, but will be giving different aspects of it, that how this needs to be understood. Okay, and yesterday I was talking from the analysis of the dependent origination, the second sutta, the discourse from that. So now today I will be reading from the clinging, and again, rather than a personal view on it, I'm trying to give you a reference from what the Buddha meant by these things. Okay, so the next one is the clinging, and the Buddha said that, and what bhikkhus is clinging. Now clinging is upadana. So we have to remember that after the craving there is a upadana, the clinging. And so this clinging is again sometimes is known as a grasping, or sometimes it is known as a attachment. And now this is basically the beginning of new formations begins. And here says, what is clinging? There are these four kinds of clinging. So Buddha is giving these four kinds of clingings that one normally has. And number one is clinging to sensual pleasure, clinging to views, clinging to rules and vows, clinging to a doctrine of a self. This is called clinging. Now here, clinging, it's divided into four types. Here, first one is called clinging to sensual pleasure. And here, clinging to sensual pleasure is, in Pali, it's called kamupadana. Kamupadana. Upadana is clinging, and kama means the sensual pleasure. And that basically, we know whatever comes to contact with the eyes, nose, eye, ear, tongue, nose, and all the five senses, we basically cling on to it, hanging on to it. Like when we see beautiful things, we want to hang on with that. Oh, what a beautiful things. when we hear beautiful songs, and we're longing for that to listen again and again. And even sometimes people go on beautiful beaches for the holidays, and once they cut back, and they will be clinging onto that. And these are the clinging of sensual pleasure. And not only that is the clinging here, this also means the negative experiences as well, that we see, that we hear, that we experience of having something which is really disgusting, like that. So that is also clinging too. Basically, pleasure and unpleasant feelings regarding the five senses, and that is clinging, and people cling on to that. And obviously we can see that the modern world is so much indulged with this modern technologies, and you always have to have new ones as soon as new devices are available, such as the iPhone. And I have seen whenever new devices announced, people will be lining up from even 4 o'clock early morning to get the first hand of experience of this new devices, and they can wait for even 4 or 5 hours just to get the new device, and that's simply to entertain, and that's essential pleasure too. And meanwhile, attachment to the good taste foods, delicious foods. People can travel far and wide simply to get a delicious food, and sometimes maybe very expensive, and yet simply because of that attachment to that food, they will be traveling to get it too. And in terms of the second one, which is the clinging to the views, and here again, views, I mentioned early on and even yesterday, that attachment to one's understanding and one's view on things. Even there are people who think that there's only one truth that they know is the truth, not anybody else's truth is the truth, or defining their knowledge is the truth, not anybody else's, and that is also clinging onto the view. Okay, which again we can relate to the story from the Kalamas, that the Buddha was traveling through the Kalama village, Kesaputiya village, and then there the people from this Kalamas came to the Buddha and asked the Buddha, simply saying that they have seen so many other religious teachers gone by through this village, and they always talked highly about their views and always discard others' views. And in that case, the Buddha simply said that this is reasonable that you have doubts, because everyone has got their own views as a right, rather than in a neutral or investigative understanding. So like that. And this is again, even this we can see in the present day, modern day as well, that there are so many people have got their own view is the right view rather than somebody else's. Particularly in the politics, you can see that their agenda and their view is right than opponents' views or opponents' understanding, and this is how it's been nasty. And sometimes it can be a very, very nasty too. And obviously you can experience in your life, and even nowadays there is a US election is going on, and you can see that each candidates are trying to explain that their view and their understanding is right and others are not. Like that. But furthermore, what we need to understand as a normal person, particularly as being a Buddhist, we shouldn't be taking extremely that Buddha's teachings are the only truth, the rest of others are none, and which again applies to anyone, any religious people who are thinking that their religion is the only truth rather than anybody else. And that view also known as the attachment to the views that one has. The very moment when you give up ability to let go of your own views on the things and the ability to understand things as they truly are, then that moment you will be able to accept their views, others' views, and respect their understanding, their level of understanding, and seeing the value of it. So that's why we always need to check that, our understanding. Even we ourselves, oftentimes we think that we know, but later on we realize that we do not know. And this is very, very a classical example that everyone face it. Particularly me, I experience it a lot. I still remember, when I was doing the MSc in Aberdeen University. At that time, when I was, the first day when I entered the library, in only the section of sociology on the religious studies, I found hundreds of books, and I thought, goodness me, how many books are here? And then I went on different floors and then checked books. There are thousands of books. And I thought myself that I know very little, and a little, not only the little, it's very, very little, so ignorant to the things like that. So we know only one subject, even that subject we cannot comprehend completely. So that's why we have to understand that too. And the third one is rules and vows. And there are again people thinking that their sila or the precepts, they are purer than others. Their practice is purer than others. Their practice is taking to the liberation than others. I am pure than anybody else. And that view also is not good. Particularly some people can take the 5 precepts and then seeing themselves as a superior than anybody else. And there are again other people who are observing 8 precepts and demonstrating themselves like a very special one than somebody else. And that is also taking as the not right understanding of it, and that's also clinging. And the last one is again a self, doctrine of a self, and this is again, it's very difficult subject to comprehend, and people, particularly we are still attached to ourself, and it's very difficult to take the non-self view, which the ultimate truth or the practice of the Buddhism. I still remember that once a man called me asking about the Nibbana, the ultimate goal of Buddhism, and then I said that, that means there is no self. And he replied saying, then what happens with myself? So that is simply the still wanting to have this sense of existence, and so this existential view, as long as we have, we will not be able to comprehend this anatta, the doctrine of anatta or a non-self. But again, this is simply because of the clinging of a myself, and that's why we have the teaching called I making, my making. And so we always want to see who am I, what I will be, and that's another reason why people wants to have siblings or the new generations, and particularly like a family members. Once you see the grandson and grandchildren, that moment you feel so happier, because you have a sense of a security that after you have gone, someone is carrying your genes, and someone will be carrying or continuing your inheritance for good. And with that, your name and your pictures will be worshipped, and will be kept in their minds and continue for another maybe 100 or 200 years or in the future, like that. And that's simply because of the attachment or the clinging towards the self that we have. But in overall, these are all conditioned arises, and once we don't have that condition, then there will be no existence. And this is simply because of the clinging to these, there is an existence. Okay, so again today I just able to cover on the only one topic, that is a clinging, and this is, I will end here for today, and we'll continue following days in the following aspects of the paticcasamuppada. So I end here for tonight's reflection, and thank you everyone for listening, and may you all be well and happy. Take care, and see you tomorrow. In a few moments time we're going to have a chanting and guided meditation. You're most welcome to join with us. If not, then see you tomorrow. Otherwise, see you shortly. Thank you. May the Buddha Dhamma Sangha bless you. Sadhu.